It's back to school for thousands of students at San Diego State University. How safety is an issue with the growing rise of electric scooters. And a long-term warning for California as a new report details the impact of climate change.
They were all managing barely to hang on by just a tiny thread, and they were doing it with lots of dignity at the end, the last quarter of their lives.
The California Dream Project looks at how the city of Santa Monica is paying seniors to help keep them in their homes.
How many people are offered to get in the front line and get the hell out of hell and say no?
And we talk with a local veteran who served time as a prisoner of war with John McCain. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebone Monet. President Donald Trump says NAFTA is coming to an end after reaching an agreement with Mexico on a new trade partnership. The newly named U.S.-Mexico Free Trade Agreement has a focus on auto manufacturing. It increases the percentage of parts that must come from North America. It also increases the number of cars built in factories that pay $16 per hour or better. The Trump administration is working on negotiations with Canada to join the deal. President Trump spoke earlier today at the White House.
I like to call this deal the United States-Mexico Trade Agreement. I think it's an elegant name. I think NAFTA has a lot of bad connotations for the United States because it was a ripoff. It was a deal that was a horrible deal for our country. And I think it's got a lot of bad connotations to a lot of people. And so we will probably you and I will agree to the name. We will see whether or not we decide to put up Canada or just do a separate deal with Canada if they want to make the deal. The simplest deal is more or less already made. It'll be very easy to do and execute.
This bilateral trade agreement is a step in the right direction, according to Paola Avila with the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. She says this deal ends the trade war between the U.S. and Mexico, but says it's incomplete without Canada.
Any agreement that is only bilateral is a lesser agreement than what we have right now. However, it's progress, and we're very happy. A deal without Canada is not a deal, actually, so there is a big risk. It is critical to have Canada as part of the ultimate, the deal in the end. According to the Trade Promotion Authority, the president didn't have the authorization to have to enter into negotiations with Mexico alone for a bilateral agreement. We do need Canada as part of the ultimate agreement. Otherwise, you need to start over.
Canada's foreign minister is expected in D.C. next week to try to restart negotiations. It will be a week of remembrance for Senator John McCain, who died over the weekend in Arizona. The 81-year-old had been battling a form of brain cancer. Flags are flying at half-staff across the nation. This was the scene today at Miramar National Cemetery. Senator McCain will be buried at the U.S. Naval Academy Cemetery in Maryland. Earlier today, his former campaign manager read a letter McCain wrote as a final farewell.
We weaken our greatness when we confuse our patriotism with tribal rivalries that have sown resentment and hatred and violence in all the corners of the globe. We weaken it when we hide behind walls rather than tear them down, when we doubt the power of our ideals rather than trust them to be the great force for change they have always been. We are 325 million opinionated, vociferous individuals. We argue and compete and sometimes even vilify each other in our raucous public debates. But we have always had so much more in common with each other than in disagreement. If only we remember that and give each other the benefit of the presumption that we all love our country, we will get through these challenging times. We will come through them stronger than before. We always do.
A book of condolences has been opened at the U.S. Embassy in Vietnam. McCain spent 5 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam and later played an important role in normalizing relations between the two countries. One San Diego resident has a very personal connection to the late Senator John McCain. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh says the two were both naval aviators in Vietnam and served time together as prisoners of war.
And that was a very rugged area, and we were in a walled little compound.
Jim Bettinger met John McCain on Christmas Eve, 1969. His Navy Phantom had gone down over Laos. He was brought into what the other POWs dubbed the Hanoi Hilton. John McCain had already been a POW for 2 years.
John was never short of courage to stick up for someone who was being put upon.
He remembers McCain once spent days in chains, locked in solitary confinement after tipping off the other prisoners that the guards were coming. McCain yelled profane jokes through the walls to boost their spirits. He famously refused an offer to be released early because his father was an admiral.
How many people are offered to get in the line and get the hell out of hell and say no?
McCain was tortured and eventually forced to sign a statement for the North Vietnamese.
I know John, at certain points, had to give war information and his name, rank, and serial number. And I think most of the other prisoners, including Admiral Stockdale, did too.
The two would only meet a couple of times after they were released, including when McCain came to San Diego. Bettinger said he wasn't surprised that McCain gravitated toward politics.
So he had that kind of feisty and go against the grain kind of attitude, and always a propensity to speak up for people that weren't getting represented and spoken for. And I think that's what made him kind of got that reputation in the Senate, and particularly as being a maverick.
McCain accepted an award aboard the USS Midway in 2011. He called out a protester in San Diego while stumping for Mitt Romney in 2012. Bettinger felt McCain remained unchanged from the brash, dedicated naval officer who helped his comrade survive imprisonment in North Vietnam.
He inspired many, and not just me, but many others. And I think the only thing that we leave behind us maybe is our reputation and how we helped others. And he certainly did that in large quantity and quality.
Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
PBS NewsHour will have continuing coverage on Senator John McCain's death and his legacy. It airs tonight at 7 here on KPBS. It's the first day of school for thousands of San Diego State University students. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says this year, campus police are facing a new safety concern.
This year, students at San Diego State have a new way to get to classes. Electric scooters have grown in popularity downtown and at the beaches. Now the motorized scooters are finding their way to college campuses.
We're just now starting to see them surface here on campus.
San Diego State campus police say technically the scooters are only allowed on roadways and bike paths, and riders must wear a helmet.
As of yet, we haven't had an issue of that. We haven't put together a proactive enforcement detail on that.
Campus police say they have not given any scooter tickets yet this year, but everyone we saw riding the scooters did not have a helmet.
I'm not worried about getting a ticket for a helmet at all, really. It's more about just watching out, because there's a lot of people around here and you never really want to run into somebody, because then that's when the problem's going to unfold.
Police say the university doesn't contract with electric scooter companies to have them dropped off on campus, and so far the scooters have not been an issue.
We'll have to evaluate it as things progress and see if they become a problem or if they are presenting an issue that we have to do more enforcement.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
KPBS is a service of San Diego State University. California's latest climate change assessment was released today, and the report paints some grim pictures about the future. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
The assessment is part of the state's effort to help decision makers understand the changes that are coming because of climate change. Scripps Institution of Oceanography researcher Alexander Gershinov says the climate is getting hotter and sea levels are rising. He says this year's wildfires are a warning about longer and hotter wildfire seasons.
What the climate projections suggest is that this is what we can expect more frequently in the future. So a longer wildfire season pushing, with the dry fuels pushing into the winter when the Santa Ana wind activity peaks as well, and then you're more likely to get later, stronger, and longer wildfires.
Gershinov says sea level rise will also cause increased flooding of coastal roads and potentially completely eliminate a third to two-thirds of Southern California's beaches. He says that hotter temperatures will also shrink the Sierra snowpack, reduce state water supplies, and boost the demand for electricity. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
A plan to help the state's recycling industry is another step closer to the governor's desk. The bill would revise regulations offering consumers more opportunities to redeem refunds when they recycle. Environmental advocates say the state's recycling industry is in crisis, with nearly 1,000 recycling centers closing up shop in the last few years. They say the beverage container recycling rate has fallen below 80% for the first time in a decade.
Because people are not recycling as much, those nickels are piling up. And what we're proposing to do is take those nickels from consumers that weren't able to find a place to recycle and use that money to create incentives to support the recycling centers and to bring back new recycling centers to rural areas and other communities that have lost their recycling center.
The measure is up for a vote in the Senate this week. Proponents say the bill would help support about 450 new recycling centers statewide. A new report details the trouble first responders had in communicating with each other during the Las Vegas mass shooting. 58 people died in last year's attack. Hundreds more were hurt. National and local agencies worked on the report, which details how dispatchers received 1,500 calls in the first 2 hours. Some of those calls included false reports about suspicious activity and victims. The report also states that first responders were not fully staffed for such a large event. The Holy Flyer flares up again. Fire crews have worked for 3 weeks to contain this wildfire in the Cleveland National Forest. Forest Service shared this image this morning of the new activity, and another was captured by a National Weather Service camera showing smoke visible from surrounding communities. Prior to this, the fire was listed as 100% contained after burning more than 22,000 acres. A local man has been charged with arson. California lawmakers are working on a plan to improve preparedness and response to wildfires. As Ben Bradford of Capitol Public Radio reports, the plan would help utilities reduce their cost.
The proposal calls for utilities to prepare detailed plans to protect equipment and extended state funding for fire prevention and fighting. It would also allow new ways for utilities to pass costs on to ratepayers, such as if state regulators determined a fire was out of a company's control.
There are going to be impacts to ratepayers. There's just no other way around it. And I think we need to be honest about that.
Assembly Republican leader Brian Daly said utility investors must also take on a larger share of the risk, but not so much that it bankrupts utilities, as they've claimed it will. Utilities and their employees union argue lawmakers must limit the company's court liability for fires. Ratepayer groups representing businesses and consumers have called that and the current proposed cost shifts a bailout. Lawmakers have a week to present and pass a bill before the legislative session ends. At the state capitol, I'm Ben Bradford.
Nuclear regulators will take a look at the San Onofre site after a near accident occurred while moving highly radioactive spent fuel. KPBS reporter Allison St. John says the utility in charge has stopped its process until the inspection is complete.
A team of inspectors from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission will spend about a week at San Onofre next month. The federal agency says it will review what happened when a canister loaded with radioactive spent fuel got stuck while being lowered into a storage vault. The near accident was revealed earlier this month at a community engagement panel by Safety Inspector David Fritsch.
There were gross errors on the part of two individuals, the operator and the rigger. that are inexplicable. So what we have is a canister that could have fallen 18 feet. It's a bad day. That happened. And you haven't heard about it. That's not right.
Southern California Edison called the event a serious near miss. The NRC says it will interview personnel, review corrective actions, and find out if Edison has a plan to lift a canister back out of the storage vault to see if it's damaged. The NRC adds that its initial review will decide if the inspection should be elevated to an augmented inspection team. The last time the NRC launched an augmented inspection was in 2012, when San Onofre's recently installed steam generators developed a radioactive leak that ultimately resulted in the permanent shutdown of the plant. Alison St. John, KPBS News.
With 70 days until the general election, the focus is on affordable housing today at the state capitol. Democratic lawmakers joined a rally in support of two ballot measures, Proposition 1 and Proposition 2. The measures would authorize a combined $6 billion in state bonds to be spent on affordable housing construction and programs.
As we grapple with, outrageous rents and a tremendous explosion of homelessness, including a hepatitis crisis that killed 20 people in the San Diego community, we must build more housing. That's how we will solve this problem. And I think for every constituent that is really shocked by what they see in our homelessness crisis in San Diego, and they want to know what they can do about it, the easiest thing they can do is show up in November and vote yes on 1 and 2. It will create hundreds of new homes in San Diego, potentially thousands or more.
Critics say the propositions would have a small impact on the larger housing problem. The state analysis shows California's short 1.5 million housing units, while the propositions would help about 55,000 households. Experts warn homelessness among seniors could get worse as baby boomers transition into retirement. As part of our statewide collaboration covering the California Dream, KPBS reporter Amitha Sharma looks at one city that's giving seniors money.
Santa Monica conjures up images of the beach, of sprawling mansions, but it's also a place where seniors are straining to pay their rent.
We had one household where the participant was eating every other day. We had another household where the participant was trading her parking space for protein powder.
That's Lisa Barone with the city of Santa Monica. She says the stories were difficult to hear.
They were all managing barely to hang on by just a tiny thread, and they were doing it with lots of dignity at the end, the last quarter of their lives.
So the city set out on a 14-month experiment last November. It started giving cash between $200 and $660 a month to nearly 24 seniors to help them pay their rent.
Hey, how you doing? Well, thank you. Come on in.
Kay, who asked that we not use her last name, walked into Barone's office on a recent afternoon. She was dressed in a glamorous red outfit that she proudly pointed out came from a thrift store. Kay is 70. She says before she got into the program, she lived on her $1,000 Social Security check.
If I didn't have money to eat after paying my monthly bills, I just didn't eat. There's literally nothing for nothing.
And that meant no money for partial dentures.
I had to have 12 teeth pulled out of my head in one day so that I could get dentures because they wouldn't pay for partials.
No money to go anywhere.
There were many times I had to say to someone, I don't even have the money to take a bus to get to you.
This one-time actress, dancer, nanny, waitress, and car saleswoman says Santa Monica's monthly subsidy has spared her.
If it weren't for the city of Santa Monica helping me, I would probably, by now, have been evicted and on the street.
We are human beings. We have to help each other. And they know that, they understand that. And it's an avant-garde city, okay?
70-year-old Pierre de Villandry laughs now. But just 1 year ago, he was racked with anxiety because he couldn't afford his bills. He was dogged by one thought.
What's going to happen tomorrow? And how I'm going to live tomorrow?
When he got the letter from the city of Santa Monica that he was accepted into the pilot program,
it was something that came down from heaven, you know.
20% of California's elderly live in poverty, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. Santa Monica city officials say the 14-month project will cost $300,000, less, they say, than what taxpayers would spend if the seniors became homeless.
How dire their circumstances are.
Santa Monica's Director of Housing and Economic Development, Andy Agel, says the city sees helping out as part of its responsibility.
In most of California, Social Security is barely going to pay your rent. And so are we as a state, as Californians, going to say, oh, just do your best. Let's add everybody who's over 65 is going to be homeless. Is that really who we want to be as a country, as a state?
I'm really grateful to the city of Santa Monica beyond words. It's the least we can do for people.
Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
Next year, the city of Santa Monica plans to evaluate if the program is working and if it can be used elsewhere. For more on this story and others that explore the state of the California dream, head to kpbs.org.
I'm John Yang. Tonight on the NewsHour, a former top Vatican diplomat accuses Pope Francis of covering up sex abuse allegations and calls on him to resign. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Things are pretty quiet here across San Diego County. Taking a look at the radar, not much going on. Perhaps a couple of clouds moving through in spots, but mostly sunny conditions. Here's a fun fact. San Diego County had about 31 days in a row of temperatures overnight reaching 70 or above. That's warm. We have had a very warm pattern here for our overnights, and that's going to continue. And that's mainly because the Pacific Ocean has been slightly warmer as well. So it's keeping us warm overnight. Taking a look at the big picture on the satellite, not much going on. It's quiet. Less monsoon moisture, so even the four corners are staying dry, and a pretty nice pattern. Oceanside tonight, 66 degrees for the low. San Diego at 70. Chula Vista, 66. And Mount Laguna right around 57 degrees. Tonight, increasing clouds across the metro area. When you wake up, it's going to look pretty cloudy out there. But then, of course, it'll break up and we will have plenty of sunshine throughout the day. It's going to be seasonably hot in the southwest. Pretty tranquil conditions. If you want to be outside, well, why not? Things are looking pretty perfect across the region for that. Oceanside reaching 80 tomorrow. San Diego also reaching 80. That is slightly warmer than our average. In El Cajon, 89 degrees. And Borrego Springs still in the triple digits, mainly sunny. Mount Laguna, the cool spot, 76. Late week, expect to see dry and pleasant conditions here across the southwest. Along the coast, our temperatures will be cruising through those low 80s all week with partly sunny skies. Our lows in the 60s, so finally cooling down just a touch. Inland, expect to see lots of sunshine here with temperatures slowly getting warmer. By Saturday, we're back up to 90 degrees, and our overnights are in the 60s as well. In the mountains, expect to see mostly sunny skies. We're starting off in the 70s, but by the weekend, we will be up into the low 80s. So a bit of a warm up here. And in the deserts, it's going to be pretty nice out here with triple-digit temperatures, lots of sun. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Ebony, back to you.
You'll likely soon spot a new sign on the I-15. KPBS reporter Taryn Minto says a plan to direct you to the Little Saigon district in City Heights is moving forward.
The legislature is poised to give final approval to add a freeway sign promoting the Little Saigon Cultural and Commercial District. The resolution from San Diego's Assemblyman Todd Gloria directs Caltrans to determine the cost of the signs, which will be covered by the nonprofit Little Saigon San Diego Foundation. Gloria says it's part of a larger effort to brand the district as a destination.
Our vision for Little Saigon is something similar to what we now have in Little Italy. You know, a number of years ago, it wasn't what it is now, but now it's where everyone wants to go. And we want to do that in Little Saigon. And one of the ways we can help that is if we can put some signage on the freeway to direct motorists and other people who are visiting the community that this gem, that this collection of businesses and this amazing culture are just right there on El Cajon Boulevard.
The Assembly must still approve Senate amendments, but a Caltrans spokesman says discussions with the Little Saigon San Diego Foundation are already underway. Communities of cultural and historic significance must meet certain criteria before a freeway sign will be considered, and it doesn't appear that legislative action is always required. According to a Senate analysis, there wasn't clear indication Caltrans would move forward with the signs, even though the area met requirements. The analysis said, quote, "The author has received mixed messages from Caltrans over how to ensure the signs are erected. This resolution is the surest way." Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
The Assembly is expected to give a final approval this week before the legislature wraps up for the year. Now, here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom, remembering Neil Simon. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando goes to the Old Globe Theater, where the playwright's work is currently being performed. And the son of the late Martin Luther King Jr. talks with KPBS about the work that's bringing him to San Diego. That's tomorrow on Midday Edition. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.